Cheryl, that could be you in that Hawaiian shirt.
I wish.
That was my guessing too.
I have a hat like that.
You have the hat?
I believe
like
that.
perfect.
Were you looking at the aerobics instructor or the guitar player?
Guitar player. I suppose you could be the aerobics instructor.
You have to think and exercise, I don't do it.
Good evening. The Auburn City Council study session scheduled for today, Monday, March 25th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. is being held in person and virtually. To listen to the meeting by phone or Zoom, please call the numbers listed on the agenda. Telephone number 253-205-0468 and the toll-free 888-475-4499. And the web Zoom is listed as well on the agenda, which can be found online on the city's website. Can we please have roll call here?
Deputy Mayor Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Mayor,
Here.
Councilmember Baldwin,
She will be right here.
Councilmember Rakes,
Here.
Councilmember Clinton Taylor,
Here.
Councilmember Tracy Taylor,
Here.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Here.
Thank you. And do we have any agenda modifications?
No, Chair, we do not.
Okay, excellent. The first agenda item under number 3 is a ready report out. And I would just say, I want to thank the mayor for giving me a briefing on what happened, because unfortunately I was not able to be at the Ready meeting last Thursday. But the Ready Coalition continues to meet to work on communication around values and building the framework for our work plan. More work to come, and we will report that out as we engage that work. Next, we have a briefing on parks, the parks plan, and Director Faber is here to enlighten us all.
I don't know about that, but thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown, Council, Mayor. This is kind of a follow-up to Director Tate's presentation last Monday about the city's comprehensive plan and the numerous elements of that plan. So for the record, I'm Daryl Faber, Director of Parks, Arts, and Recreation. And I enjoy this slide that I have now, because when we did this plan, this is the one from about 7 years ago. We're gonna end up with a book like this again in a couple of months. That'll go to the Park Board Planning Commission and then to you for approval. But when we did this 2 plans ago, it was recognized that we needed a community center in Auburn and more for teens, that the golf course Quonset hut needed to be replaced with a real clubhouse, and that we needed more events and activities for our community. So we took that information and put together a lot of the activities that are recognized on this slide. And that's kind of a process we're in again right now, where every 6 years we update the plan and provide basically ask the community, what do they want our parks, arts, recreation system to look like for the next 6 years and the next 20 years, and build a plan around that. And so those are the key elements of the plan, is the vision, and we ask that in all the areas. We inventory with the consultant that we're using all of our existing inventories, go over the goals and objectives of the department, set up funding strategies, both short and long. And it's one element of the comprehensive plan. It appears in the plan as an appendix, and then people can reference the electronic copy, or there's copies around the city and at the library, etc. So it's a really important document that kind of lays the framework for what we want our city system to look like. It's an old system, as you're all aware. Auburn's been a city for a long time. It's very proud of its parks and neighborhoods, its events and activities. So it's great when we ask for feedback here, because not only do we hear the good, we hear the bad. And we did a really large outreach this year. There's so many new methods for doing this. And our most efficient, if you look at this slide, you can see the A boards that we had in all 34 of our parks, well, 30 of our parks that were safe places to have these, where with the QR codes, you could directly go to the survey. It was available in 7 different languages, and it got you right on site. While you were standing there, you could answer the survey questions that are required by the state as part of your parks plan. In addition, it was linked via GIS that if you saw a problem or an issue in a park, it would pin where you were, and your comment would go back to, we need a new restroom at Regner Park, or whatever your comment was. Please help the homeless people along the Reddington Levee Trail. So we were able to take those action items, put it in the plan, and that'll help us address where we go in the next 6 years. And sooner, if it was something that we could do the next day, we just got after it. But there were 619 electronic responses, which we thought was just fabulous. And then numerous more hard copy responses that we collected at things such as last summer's Farmers Market, various festivals and events. When we did a concert movie in the park, we went out there as well. We questionnaire the teens at our after school program. We set up everywhere to get answers to the public, as well as on our Parks Recreation Facebook page, a lot of responses to that as well. So we're really excited with the surveys that came back, and that'll be a large part of the outline included in the new parks plan as it becomes apparent. So we worked with the community also on visioning through the Parks Board and Arts Commission, and the senior center has a board as well. So we worked with them going over the previous vision and what we're going to be doing. And we talked a lot about site-specific items that came up. There was a lot of talk about pickleball because it's kind of the rage and where they wanted that. We worked with all 20 of our maintenance staff, because they're the boots on the ground, and asked them where are the deficiencies, what's not working, what's working. And also with them on equipment and capital repair and replacement. We work with Ingrid's group on our large mowers and things, but a lot of times they come up with smaller things that we don't know about that we need to slide into the budget if they're an item that's less than like $5,000. And then we also worked with our Jamie Warner in our special needs program about accessibility of a lot of our sites. Where is a site hard to get to in a wheelchair, or perhaps if you're blind or whatever. So we actually rolled into our plan accessibility issues and equity issues as well, making sure that all of our neighborhoods have access to parks. Probably the largest thing that's really just so much more better, that sounds great, is better than the previous plan, is being able to use our GIS system on our mapping and letting the public engage in that process. We did not only a needs assessment in our parks, but also a deferred maintenance plan, looking at what the replacement time should be for things like shelter roofs, playgrounds that are in parks that are ready to be replaced, and actually put together a good short and long range plan on items that aren't really required for the pros plan, but just helpful for our inventory and being able to plan out into the future what we wanted. As part of the survey questions, we also asked the public what do you want to see. The previous plans, there was a real especially 2 plans where there was a lot of baseball going on and this and that. Now baseball's kind of gone off, and soccer's gone up, and futsal's gone up, and some of our communities are looking into other sports that weren't even considered 1 or 2 plans ago. So to listen to that, and then work with our consultants on where do we have spaces available that we can create all-weather fields, some synthetic fields, where depending on how you line those fields, you can play almost any sport imaginable on them. So becoming much more flexible, because we're not growing land, and so we have limited opportunities for new capacity, except increasing the capacity on the fields that we have, other than a couple sites in Auburn. So we've been working on the process of establishing our goals and objectives, recommendations, and actions. And this focus of this section of the plan is really on recreation programming, special events, and the arts. So the parks plan is really the main part of the parks and open space plan, the pros plan, but a recreation element is key as well, because that's where we find out all the programs that we offer, which ones are seeing success, which ones are declining. How can we keep up to date with what the people want to have in their community over the next few years? And that we find out that, oh, if we only have one gymnasium for a community of 90,000, is that appropriate? Should we build something new up on Lee Hill, or should we partner with the school district in their new facilities? So making sure that based on the previous numbers of acres per thousand or facilities per thousand, that we're staying up to date on what the needs are, and then thinking of creative methods to solve our deficiencies. In our acres per thousand of parkland, we're slightly deficient, but not very much, and we're really lucky here in that on the Lee Hill, we own two pieces of parkland, both the Jakeson Tree Farm and Auburndale 2. So we own land, we just haven't had them developed yet. So we don't have to go out and buy a lot of parkland. There are some open spaces along the river, et cetera, that we work with King County on acquiring. But for real parkland, we're actually sitting in a pretty good situation until Auburn grows out some more, and some of the sites that are being master planned now will ensure that there's parks in those. And also in this area, we did a lot of surveying of existing customers in recreation and the arts. What classes and programs do they appreciate? Are we doing enough for youth as it relates to, we know what our sports programs are as it relates to dance and the arts. And so a lot of programming with existing customers, which is by far our best survey result because we have them captive. But we also are trying to look into what groups aren't coming to our community center and our teen center, and why aren't you coming? Is it accessibility? Is it financial? What is it? So as we work our way through DEI planning, how do we make sure that parks should be available to everyone, and our program should be as accessible as possible as well. So that was a great exercise, especially with our recreation and arts team and the Arts Commission. I spoke briefly about level of funding. That's a level of service. That's a big part of the plan. There used to be a real focus on acres per thousand and activities per thousand. A lot of that has changed because a statewide system, you'll find the activities that people are playing maybe in Yakima or Richland don't match what they're playing in Kirkland or Redmond. And so now the state's kind of come up with a much more, nobody knows better what sports and activities people want to play in their community than the people who are in the community. So there's not like a statewide number anymore, but more of just a general approach to are your people being served with the right activities. So that's why we were asking that. Main reason for the plan obviously is a framework for state, county, and federal grants. The RCO, the Recreation Conservation Office of the state, that's where we go to for a lot of our funding and a lot of our match, as well as federal funds with land water conservation. And so you have to have a plan approved for most of those categories. There's a few that you don't have to have a plan, but by far the majority of state grants, if you don't have a plan approved by the council, you're not going to be eligible to even apply. And it also provides the basis for park impact fees. We've had park impact fees on the books in Auburn for maybe a dozen years or so, and that's our way of usually matching the state and federal grants with our capacity impact fee projects. And so our consultants are also working on, is our existing number too high, too low based on proposed growth in the city over the next period, and the programs that we have. I anticipate the park impact fee will stay very similar to what it is right now. I don't see it going up, and I think we have enough needs in our community that it'll show that there's still capacity for more recreation opportunities. So we'll continue with that process as well. We should have those numbers back, I would say, in about 2 months. They're kind of getting to the point in the plan of the putting it all together, not in the final binder yet, but pretty close to it. So I would anticipate by June, July, we'll have a draft plan, and we'll work again with the planning department as they roll their comprehensive plan forward as well. So I think the timing's perfect this year to keep going on that. it's kind of a little bit redundant, but it'll have a 6 and a 20-year funding plan in here, and that CFP rolls into the city's CFP for funding. A lot of them, the project's in there, but the money isn't identified. It'll just show, to be determined or whatever. But you have to show the project in your plan, or you're not gonna even be able to apply. It'll talk about on property acquisition, are there areas in the city that are short on park space? The West Hill would be probably the only area in Auburn that shows a lack of park space. And then it's also our chance as a staff to monitor the capital project progression. When we come up with a project for a year, are we getting it accomplished, or is there a reason why it had to be delayed a year or two, either funding or manpower, permitting? There's usually numerous reasons. So we'll monitor our progression based on that approved document as well. And I think that's the end. This key element in the plan, I'm happy to answer questions, but even more excited in a couple of months to come back actually with the plan. I think it's going to be great, and I think the best thing was just the community involvement this time, far more than last time. It was part of the project before, but this time it's really like, I think, on everybody's eyes. How do we get out there in our neighborhoods and let people talk to us? And typically recreation and arts people aren't hesitant to go out and ask people things. They're kind of outgoing personalities, and so it's been pretty effective that way as well. So we'll be back in probably 8 to 10 weeks with a draft after it gets through the Park Board and the Planning Commission, and then we'll adopt it and go get more money.
All right, super. Does anyone on the council have a question? Yes, Councilmember Rakes.
I do, Daryl.
Yeah.
Do you, and I don't know the answer to this, do we have any special needs parks now? Or do you plan on putting one in?
Playgrounds?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Discovery Playground at Les Cove is a fully accessible park. And when it was designed, it was probably one of the first really good ones in the state. And we'll have to modernize a few of the pieces there. Some things have changed, but everything in there is accessible. And we do look at that now. We're converting a lot of our playgrounds from the FIBAR, the chips, to poured in place to make them more accessible. The new one that's going to be opened in a few weeks out at Forest Villa is a mix of chips and poured in place surfacing. So we're trying to do more and more of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes,
I think she had her
okay.
hand before me.
Councilmember Baldwin.
There's fine.
Mhm.
Sorry to join in late. It's the fun of working and trying to get down here. One of the questions I had was in the board retreat we had last year, I'd shared a whole mess of ideas around park space, and I was curious if any of that content was being worked in as suggestions in the same fashion we have our surveys.
Yeah, we haven't done, like the group that you had on there, not directly related to, we've been talking to communities. I think community gardens were on there, and I can't remember off the top of my head what all the, so some of those concepts were rolled, like we're reviewing those, we were reviewing all the other citizen comments,
Right.
but we haven't done like actual items until we get the plan adopted at that point, but yeah, we're continuing taking comments. And I have the list.
Okay. I was going to bring it up because there was one thing that I had been meaning to bring back to you as director, which is when we had the opening of Don's Place, that's a segment of our population here in Auburn that, are folks who are just beginning to be housed again and looking to be engaged in their community. And I had asked what types of programming they have in that space and whether there'd be any sort of interest if we were working with parks to maybe have that be a host site. And they're very keen on the concept, so I wanted to relay that, and I've got contacts I can share with you on that front.
Yeah.
And then likewise in that same space with our Auburn Resource Center, where we have our day shelter and overnight shelter, we'd really love to see us be able to use Parks and Rec as a mechanism to reach out to those folks and make sure that we're not losing them from the community just because they're displaced or homeless at their current point in time. So if that's something that we can look at incorporating, whether it's from an inclusion aspect or in some capacity, we know those facilities are there. we know we partner with them in many different ways, and would love to see that extended in a Parks and Rec space.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to meet with anybody there and share both our literature, but also ease of how you can access it and make it so that cost isn't a barrier.
Yeah.
To whether the fitness space or to an activity, or to their children. I mean, I'm passionate about somebody shouldn't not be able to play T-ball as a 4-year-old because they can't afford the $30. I mean, because
Yeah,
it's really important.
I think that's exactly it. Is we know about those programs, but making
Yeah,
sure
but
those
they might
folks
not.
who could make the most of it, as to make sure that they're in the loop. And then likewise, with our newly annexed section of Kent, now Auburn, have we done anything to make sure surveys get out to those households?
Yeah, both surveys and our brochure went to them even before. While they weren't Auburn
Official.
residents, they registered, and most of them probably said they were, because it says Auburn on their address, and they weren't gonna tell us they had to pay 20% more. So those were active customers before, and we
Okay.
engaged with them, and
Fantastic.
yeah, that was an easy one for our department.
Thank you.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Yes, I've just got two. One is you said you have done some things in 7 languages. What languages are those?
I don't know.
You can
I
get
know
back
they were
to
in the
me.
7 most spoken languages in the Auburn School District. I don't know what those 7 were.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next one is, I remember that I forwarded something to you that I got from National Leagues of Cities on posting at the parks for people that can't see. Are you doing Braille or anything like that in
Yeah.
the different languages and stuff?
Not through that company that basically sells that system, but there's other signage that we're continuing to look at doing, like at our newer parks, that do the same thing without using that company. Super expensive, and it's something that's not copyrighted. So we're gonna be looking at how we can use that same concept in our local parks.
Well, at least you're
Yeah.
looking, that's good.
Yeah, no, it's
That's good to
very
hear, 'cause I thought
impressive.
it was really nice.
Yeah.
What they showed us there. My last question is, when's my park gonna be open?
It's gonna be,
My park.
I like that. You sound like every neighbor in Auburn.
It's top.
I wanna say April 11 and 12, they're gonna complete the first work, and then they'll come back in May for the pour it in place, but it'll be open between those until the weather has to be warm enough to do the softball surfacing. So it'll be open in like 3 weeks, and then closed for a week, and then open again.
I've only received 2 complaints about the color. The rest of them think it's pretty cool, bright.
They should have been
Kids
on
are
our
gonna
color
like
committee.
that. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Tracy Taylor.
Daryl, first off, thank you for the presentation, especially for new council members. I do want to hand it to you and your team, including your maintenance team. You guys really stay on top of keeping the trash clean, the parks clean, well-maintained and whatnot. I really hand it to your team during the farmers market, because we were approached as a family several different times on our thoughts and opinions of Lesko Park, of course, the parks around Lakeland Hills too. You guys did an amazing job at outreach, so I just wanted to give you
Thank
props
you.
for that.
Super, thank you.
Thank
Any other questions? Thank you, Director.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
the report. Next on our agenda is a briefing, permitting and decision-making. Interim Director Crum, I think, is up for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, City Council members and Mayor. Good evening. Thanks for your time tonight. I am, for the record, Jason Crum, Acting Director of Community Development, and I'm fortunate tonight to be joined by Steven Sturza, Acting Assistant Director of Community Development, and Alexandria D. Teague, Planning Services Manager for Community Development. And we do have a brief overview tonight, as Deputy Mayor mentioned, about permit and land use decision-making. But before we get started, each of us want to just take a moment to share a little bit more about ourselves. We'll start with Alexandria.
Yes, so Hello, you've seen me before in many instances, not the new council members. But again, my name is Alexandria. I am the Planning Services Manager. I have some big shoes to fill, but I'm doing my best. Prior to my time with City of Auburn, I was a long-range planner with Pierce County. And my time with the City of Auburn, I started off as a Planner 1, moved on to Planner 2, 3, and now I'm the Planning Services Manager. As a planner for the City of Auburn, I have processed all manner of current permitting applications, including sign permits, building permits, shoreline substantial development permits, preliminary plats, pretty much most of the types of permits that we see with the city. In terms of long-range planning project, I've processed amendments to our comprehensive plan, map amendments to our land use designation map, and zoning map amendments to our zoning. So I've done a lot in my time with the city, and now I'm changing roles a little bit. Okay. Thank you.
Steve Sturza, Acting Assistant Director of Community Development. Started that role in mid-January. Got some big shoes to fill. I'm doing my best. I have a professional engineering license, certified floodplain manager certification. The last time I was here was during the floodplain code update back in 2020, so it's been a long time since I've been here. Before taking on this role, I was a development review engineer, started with the city 10 years ago, became the development engineer manager 6 years ago. So processed grading permits, facility extension agreements, so worked closely with community development staff and then public works staff as well. So feel like we've gotten me and my group a good relationship with public works. Prior to working with the city, I was a civil design engineer for close to 10 years. So designing commercial developments, industrial subdivisions, multifamily, things of that nature.
All right, and lastly, again, I'm Jason. I've been with the city over 10 years. In my current and some of my former roles, I act as the city's building and fire code official. So kind of rendering decisions related to building and fire code permitting. I, like Steve, am a licensed professional engineer by the state of Washington in civil engineering. So prior to my time here at the city, I worked for a private development firm designing mostly private development projects. So yeah, that's us, and we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to start by maybe not using that button. We're going to list all of these permit types one by one. No, just kidding. We're not going to do that. But we wanted to show, here's a list of, I think we got almost all of them. These are a list of 60 different types of applications that our department processes or facilitates. So licenses, permits, land use applications, projects, and then within these 60, there are also a myriad of subtypes underneath them. So counted, the last count was about 130 different subtypes. A lot of these different applications have different submittal requirements, different codes and standards apply. So Auburn City Code, Building Code, Engineering, Public Works, City of Auburn Engineering Design Standards. There might be federal regulations, state regulations that apply. For many of these applications, they get reviewed by multiple disciplines in different departments, so up to 12 different service areas at times in community development, public works, parks, arts and recreation, police department, and then outside agencies such as Valley Regional Fire Authority, who's involved in a lot of the reviews. So a lot of intricacies, a lot of ins and outs with all these different application types. We typically issue about 3,000 decisions each year. Most of those are permit decisions, permit approvals and issuances. Yeah. So most of the content that we're going to talk about tonight really comes out of Title 14 of Auburn City Code. This project review title, and there's a bunch of different chapters, things like application requirements and determination of completeness, review timelines, but what we wanted to focus on tonight is Chapter 1403, types of permits, which essentially takes many of those different types that we saw on the prior screen and kind of categorizes them into one of 4 different permit project types. So we're going to talk a little bit about each one of those. But before we do, I did want to mention, since we're talking about Title 14, we do expect to be back before City Council later this year, probably second half of the year, with some proposed updates to Title 14. And those are being initiated in response to some state legislation that passed last year, House Bill 5290, which changed some of these elements, but most specifically, the maximum amount of time that jurisdictions have from when an application is complete to rendering a decision. That time historically has been 120 days, but that has changed. There's different timelines depending on the type of permit. So I just wanted to call out that we're going to be back to talk more about that later this year. All right, now I'll hand it over to Steve to talk about our first type.
Yeah, so type 1 decisions. These are the most typical types of permits or applications that come in the door. They comprise probably, we're guessing, 90% of the applications that we receive. They're administrative decisions made by city staff that are not subject to the environmental review under the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA. These decisions include building permits, plumbing permits, mechanical, grading, short subdivisions or short plats are probably one of the largest ones that we would process. Final plats, the list goes on. You saw the list that Jason had. There's a lot of permits that were type 1 decisions. So these applications are reviewed by city staff just to make sure that they meet code, the engineering design standards, international building codes, stormwater state standards, anything that city code has adopted. So it's just city staff reviewing these. The next would be type 2 decisions. So these are type 1 decisions that also require a SEPA review. These would include permits like a building permit, but only when it's over 12,000 square feet in floor area. Grading permits when the cut and fill is over 500 cubic yards. Public facility extensions when the pipes they're putting in the ground are over 12 inches in diameter. And then any project undertaken wholly or partly on lands covered by water, which means if there's any stream, river, wetland, or floodplain that has some sort of potential impact on habitat. So SEPA is used to identify conditions that are deemed necessary to mitigate any significant adverse impact or support a finding of fact or prevent and abate public nuisances associated with a proposal. I'm going to read another thing that's directly out of code, so bear with me. And this is where conditions may be imposed which could increase requirements in the standards, criteria, or regulations of this title or other city legislation or adopted policies. So it's there to cover any impacts that are not covered by city code. It's important to know that these conditions that we could put above and beyond what our code requires have to be proportional to the project being proposed, and they also have to have a nexus. They also need to have concurrency to make sure the condition's not necessarily like a moving target for the applicant or the city. With these, there is a 14-day public notice that the public can weigh in on, and then a 14-day appeal period. After that time's over with, if there's no applicable comments, stress applicable, or appeals, that decision is considered to be valid and issued.
Okay, so type 3 decisions. So type 3 decisions are quasi-judicial final decisions made by the hearing examiner following recommendation by staff. The hearing examiner is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The hearing examiner is kind of a land use judge, and the purpose of the hearing examiner is to provide an independent review and due process in the land use regulatory decision-making process. That's a mouthful, but it is essentially an independent arbiter. The hearing examiner has the power to receive and examine available information, to conduct public hearings, to prepare a record based on findings of fact. Findings of fact is another way of saying approval criteria. To create a record of conclusions based on those findings, and to render a decision based on the findings of fact and conclusions. So examples of type 3 decisions include variances, substantial shoreline development permits, that's essentially anything that's not a shoreline exemption, preliminary plats, those are plats that are 10 lots and more, and then conditional use permits. Type 3 decisions almost always require SEPA review, and a public pre-decision hearing is required. Essentially, before the hearing examiner can render a decision, a public hearing must be held. Type 3 decisions, they also require public notice, 15 days before the public hearing. And for a type 3 decision, staff reviews the project for compliance with city code, again, approval criteria. We then prepare a staff report, exhibits, and a presentation, and a staff recommendation. The preparation of staff reports takes staff anywhere between 8 hours and 24 hours, depending on the complexity of the project. The staff report and the exhibits are then transmitted to the hearing examiner, who then holds the public hearing. At the public hearing, the hearing examiner provides the applicant opportunity to speak, as well as the public. Public testimony is considered in the hearing examiner's decision. And then following close of the public hearing, the hearing examiner has 10 days to issue a decision. The decision is provided to the city, who then forwards it on to the applicant. Most often, the hearing examiner's report contains most, if not all, of staff's findings and conclusions. So essentially, we do a lot of the heavy lifting, I would say, for the hearing examiner, and that's a kudos to us, showing that we do a lot of research. We put a lot of time in our analysis of the criteria, and put a lot of time and thought in our recommendation to the hearing examiner. Because most often, staff's recommended conditions are approval are those same conditions that the hearing examiner carries forward. So decision appeals, so type 1 and type 2 decision appeals. So pretty much most, if not all, type 1 and type 2 decisions are appealable to the hearing examiner. Type 3 decisions are also appealable, but since they've already been heard by the hearing examiner, they're actually appealed to the Superior Court. Appeals don't happen very often. In my 9 years being here, I've probably seen like 2 of them. It's just not common. But any affected party may appeal the planning director's decision to the hearing examiner. And a person has 14 days to submit their appeal to the city. The appeal is then processed in the same manner as any other application going to the hearing examiner, except that appeals are closed hearing. Following close of the hearing examiner can affirm the decision, staff's decision, remand for further proceedings, or reverse the decision. The times that the 2 appeals that, well, in process, but one that I've seen, it was essentially well, I guess I can't really speak to that, but it wasn't necessarily, well, sorry, I'm going to go into that one because I don't really have the details well enough to say it. So, but anyway, that hasn't been very often. There's like 2 that I've seen in the city. Okay, thank you. And lastly, type 4. So type 4 decisions are quasi-judicial decisions made by the city council following a recommendation from the hearing examiner. The only type 4 decision that we have is a site-specific rezone. A rezone application is a zoning map amendment or request to change the specific zoning classification of a site. Out of all the type 1, 2, 3, and 4, this is the decision that city council reviews and decides or approves. We don't process rezones very often, like less than 3 a year. Most often they're tied to amendments to the comprehensive plan and the land use map. But similar to a type 3, staff reviews the project for consistency with city code and the comprehensive plan. We prepare a staff report, exhibit, and presentation. The staff report exhibits are transmitted to the hearing examiner, who holds a public hearing, and then the hearing examiner's decision is transmitted to the city council for consideration and for decision. So those are our type 4 decisions. Okay.
So just kind of touching on what you just said, Alexandria, city council has a role in these types of decisions, but, you know, there's a handful of them, maybe 3 a year out of the 3,000 in total.
Do you want to take a question?
We could wrap up this last slide and then we'll go to questions. So we just wanted to wrap up and leave council with just, I guess, a reminder. I have to remind myself of this sometimes. These decision paths, they're in code, and that's intentional. And, you know, part of the purpose is to depoliticize the permit and land use decision-making process. So, you know, whenever an applicant, a business owner, customer, you know, comes to me and asks for my help to try to, you know, get permits sorted out or looked at, you know, get my involvement, you know, I have to always remind myself that the more those of us are involved in the decision-making process outside of kind of the established and intentional process to depoliticize those decisions, you know, the further we get away from the intent. So that is, you know, set up that way really to minimize the risk to the city collectively and to our elected officials. So as Alexandria said, the hearing examiner it makes those decisions as an impartial entity and does so on the merits of the project and making sure that it meets the codes and standards that apply. So that is
I know we have a question from Council Member Kate Baldwin.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. For an example of the type 4, would the multi-care rezone that we approved have been one of the type 4s, or would that have fallen with the updates?
I can speak to that. So, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with how it was processed, but so a standalone rezone, a rezone in which a change to the comprehensive plan map or the land use designation map, those come before City Council. But if that rezone was tied to a change in the land use designation, City Code allows us to change the land use designation and the zoning at the same time. And it's actually the Planning Commission that we present the change to, and then Planning Commission's recommendation is forwarded to City Council, and then City Council hears that decision. So unfortunately, I can't recall how it was processed, but it might have been an annual amendment last year. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's all right. I was just trying to think of, you said it was fairly rare in that one. I had recollection of seeing the full workup and the study behind it. So I was curious if that fit into that criteria.
So I think that actually was part of last year's annual amendment cycle. I think there was Auburn Dairy, Multicare, and then another site. And so yes, that went through. Since it needed a land use designation change, perhaps then it went through that process instead of just these type 4 standalone rezones. It already implements the land use designation. Now we just need to change the zoning.
Okay. All right. I know Councilmember Trout Manuel had a
Thank you,
question next.
Deputy Mayor. Alexandra, James, and Steve, thank you for a great report. It's always nice to get educated what we're doing. And again, congratulations to all three of you for your new promotion. And Steve, I apologize for not recognizing you, but it's been a while since you come across us. So thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Councilman Hall.
On the situations where you would have the SEPA review as well, is that parallel with our permitting approvals, or is that going to be in sequence? So would that follow after or during?
Sure, no, SEPA is a concurrent application. So any application that triggers the SEPA review, it is required to be submitted concurrently because SEPA needs an action. SEPA standalone, it's not actually a permit, it's a land use review. So it always accompanies some other action, whether it's a grading permit for a plat or a building over 12,000 square feet. So it's always reviewed concurrently.
Any other questions? Yes,
Sorry.
Councilmember Ball.
Last one. With the shift in state code, which is going to potentially decrease that time to complete your review and approvals for permitting, do you see that having potential impact from a staffing perspective? If I'm curious how close we are today to meeting what that new criteria is. If they're shifting from 120 down to 90 or something of that nature, are we already within the new range?
Yeah, I think we're not too concerned about having to meet the new requirements. We'll talk more about what those are, but they're 65 for type 1s, 100 days for type 2s, and then for type 3s and 4s, the timeline actually extends out longer than they are currently. What I think is going to be a challenge is we're just going to have to be a little bit more deliberate with our process and how we're receiving applications. And I fear the unintended consequence of this is really going to impact like smaller businesses and customers who don't always have the resources to navigate the permitting process and create reports and good site plans, because having to stick to that 65-day window, we're going to have to be more discriminating in how we're considering applications to be complete. But in general, we are pretty successful at meeting what we expect those timelines to be in the future. But it does remain to be seen, long term, what that impact is going to look like.
All right, thank you. Great report. Thank you. Thank you, Alexandria, Stephen. All right, so next up on our agenda tonight is a briefing about the facilities master plan. Director Gaub is here to enlighten us.
So good evening, again for the record, Ingrid Gaup, Public Works Director for the city. So we wanted to take this opportunity to educate the full council, especially those that are newer council members that weren't part of our previous process in developing the facility master plan, about what the facility master plan is and what was actually adopted by the council in 2021. So a little bit of history on that master plan. So this was a multi-department study that we conducted between 2019 and 2021, and ultimately resulted in a resolution that was adopted by the council on May 3rd of 2021, which you have in your packet along with the actual final report that was part of that resolution. So what this plan overall does is it identifies and addresses the facility needs for all of the city's facilities related to City Hall and the City Hall Annex building, as well as looking at our parks maintenance and operations facilities, our public works maintenance and operations facilities, and our police facilities. There was an additional element to the facility master plan where we actually looked at what were we spending on our general facility maintenance needs on an annual basis, and is that an appropriate amount, and is there something that we should be doing better in that realm as well. So all of those items were reviewed during that entire planning process. And the goals of the project was to basically create the welcoming and safe spaces that improve service and connect us to our community, address issues with the facilities and make improvements for efficiency, understand how our facilities impact the needs for our funding priorities, recommend a cost-effective investment to support the facility improvements that might be necessary, and to create a plan that was compelling, achievable, and supportable. It wouldn't do us any good to put a plan in front of this council. That's not something that we could fund, so that was a big portion of what we did during this planning process. So major findings and recommendations. So in the report, and you'll have much more detail in there, you can see a lot more of the pictures, but just as a quick summary, so for the police and the court, in evaluating the Justice Center, what we found in there, which was no surprise to any of us, is that it's very cramped and it's unable to accommodate the growth for those facilities. It's insufficient with a lot of unusable space because of the seismic upgrades that were necessary when we created the Justice Center. which council members that attend the tour in the next few weeks of those facilities will see what we're talking about here about unusable space, and it's mostly down in police's space on the bottom floor. Also, there was a shortage of storage for support space, so locker rooms and workout areas, just not big enough for the amount of staff that we currently have, let alone for growth for those facilities. And undersized evidence storage and an armory for police, as well as inadequate parking for the staff and security. For the maintenance and operations facilities, and this applies to, I believe, both Public Works and Parks in some of this. So again, inadequately sized, not configured well to support our crew space needs for when our crews are actually in the buildings. For Public Works, not enough warehouse and shop space, and that would be the vehicle shop space that we're talking about there. Limited coverage for our high-value equipment and vehicles, so that basically adds to the service life of the vehicle, so basically reducing that and making us have to replace those vehicles more frequently because they are exposed to the elements and therefore degrade faster. Aging facilities and a site that requires increased maintenance and is not really capable of growing with our growth needs for serving our community. And then limited capacity to service the parks in Northeast Auburn was another portion of that plan. That was a summary issue. So what we did with that information is we actually did an alternatives analysis to look at how can we make improvements to those different facilities. And I will make a note here, we did look at City Hall and City Hall Annex. There was a very small need for the City Hall and City Hall Annex for the growth over time, mostly because we had already put the investment into creating the City Hall Annex space. And so that was not the focus of the funding needs as we go forward in time. And so we really honed in on the police and then the maintenance and operations side of this. So for police, looking at renovating the Justice Center did not pencil out as a good 50-year solution, given that it's already been renovated once and its shortage of space was difficult to provide for the police. So the result of that analysis, we looked at a future location somewhere near Lescove Park or in downtown as being the ideal location, and that also led to why we purchased the property at 12th and Auburn Way South across from Lescove Park. Maintenance and operations, so obviously relocating our maintenance and operations facilities resulted in about, I want to say it was about $130 million estimate, which we did not feel was supportable and fundable over time for this city. So we looked at, can we leverage our current properties to support those facilities? And then how do we provide that satellite facility that Parks needs in Northeast Auburn to support the Parks developments in Northeast Auburn? And then the final recommendations that came out, and we'll go through some of the scenarios that led to this, identified that for police, what we really needed to do was probably replace and build a new evidence facility for them, and then renovate the Justice Center facilities to expand the space that they had there for office space, training space, and staff space. What was also identified is that there's a future need to likely replace the full headquarters for police at a future time when that funding can be supported. For maintenance and operations, we identified that we needed to do a significant investment into the maintenance and operations for Public Works to expand the facilities that we have there, as well as expanding the parks maintenance and operation facilities and building satellite facilities at Game Farm and Jacobson Tree Farm. For the administrative, so this is City Hall and City Hall Annex, we said for the long term, we're again, very small, minor needs for those facilities. So for the short term, they're fine. Long term, need to probably relook at that in 15 years from when this study was done to see if we're still in line with what we need to do for the space needs for those staff. So I mentioned at the beginning that we also talked about the facilities maintenance for the city. So what we found as we looked at how much are we putting into the maintenance needs for our city facilities, and we found that on average between 2009 and 2018, we've spent about $450,000 annually on maintaining our facilities. That's unfortunately about 50% of what it should be for the amount of building space that we have. And so that shows that we need to put some more money into our facilities to ensure that we're maintaining them and that they can continue to operate for as long as possible to provide the services we need for our city. So after we identified those needs, we then said, well, okay, how can we fund this and how can we actually build this? Because that's a lot for this city to take on. So we talked about a phasing and a financing plan to it. So phasing for the police portion of this, the intent of this, we already had identified that the roof of the Justice Center needed to be replaced. And so that was obviously one of the first items. But also acquiring a new property for the Justice Center and building a new evidence facility. So again, that is the intent behind purchasing that 12th and Auburn Way South property. And then once that evidence facility is built, we would renovate the existing Justice Center to make the current evidence building more useful for the staff that are located there, as well as expand locker room space and the other support space for the police staff. Again, this does not include the future need of the actual replacement of the headquarters for police. For maintenance and operations, and I'm going to focus on public works for this because the next slide will cover parks. So this really focused on needing to provide enclosed parking and redundant central stores. So central stores is our warehousing for all of our materials that we need to do our work. Replacing our fuel island, which is significantly aged and needs replacement, and removing a deed restriction. And that deed restriction over here on this property that's outlined in white, this is what we call our GSA parks. This is where the ball fields are over at C and 15th Street Southwest. That property was given to the city by GSA, federal entity, with a restriction on it that it needed to be used for park purposes. So in order for us to use it for anything other than park purposes, we need to work with the federal government to remove that deed restriction, which will also lead to potentially needing to relocate those ball fields at some point in the future when we need that space to another location in order to use that property for maintenance and operation purposes. In addition, what we found, we needed additional crew space for the public works staff, so we identified building a new crew building, replacing our existing wash rack, and parking, and providing an alternative access to 15th Street Southwest. Right now, the facilities rely upon an access out to C Street Southwest, a new access to 15th. It relies on an access to 15th Street Southwest that is not actually on city property, but through an easement use on an adjacent property. In addition, once we build new crew building, the intent would be to remodel the existing public works building to provide more space for additional crew space, as well as for our fleet and our central store shop space. With all of that, part of the reason that we need to remove the deed restriction on the GSA park is so that we can move our employee parking over to that location, because where we're proposing to put the new crew building is on top of where the current employee parking is located on site. For the parks M&O phasing, so there's 3 pieces to this. One of those pieces is on the parks facility that's located over at the GSA park. And it's really to relocate their greenhouses, which right now are located between the building and the property line, and between the M&O Public Works facilities and the GSA Park facility, where we have a driveway to 15th Street Southwest. So we need to relocate those greenhouses and the bulk bins that they have there, as well as add storage and renovate the crew space on the building that Parks' M&O operates out of. In addition, a Game Farm Park, we need to add some additional crew space and remodel that shop and storage space to provide additional resources there. And then with the future development of the Jacobson Tree Farm site, what we identified is that that should have an additional M&O satellite facility for the park staff to operate from. And that this was also a potential location for replacing the GSA ball fields. And then what we also did with our consultant was identify for the facilities maintenance, the ongoing deferred maintenance that we've done, is how can we realistically increase the funding for deferred maintenance over time without it being a significant hit all at once. And so they proposed a stepped increase basically to that spending over time, with the intent by 2036 of reaching that funding by increasing that funding in 2026, which is why this discussion is relevant for the next budget cycle. And then as part of that as well, they also provided some potential capital spending plan for the improvements identified for police, for public works and parks as M&O improvements. And the council did take action with the 2024 budget to provide about $2.3 million for beginning that implementation plan. That's not enough to do the full design for all of that work, but it allows us to get started this year. So I left their phasing plan as we have previously showed it in 2021 on this map, but we are probably about a year behind. So shift those numbers probably 1 year for where you'd see the major spending happening on the plans. And you can see it's also broken down between where are we spending money on police versus the public works M&O versus the parks M&O versus that administration. The administration piece was something we already had budgeted to basically remodel the lobby over on the annex on the second floor to remove some of the excess space we have in the lobby and open that space up for staff use, which is already an ongoing current project and actually will be under construction here in about a month. And then there's the potential financing strategy for how, so we've identified all these needs, and it's about a $38 million need, again, not including the police headquarters. How can we fund that? And so we identified a potential debt service process, so issuance of bonds for that $38 million with an estimated interest rate of about 4%, a term of 30 years. We estimated that that debt service would be about $2.2 million. About $1 million of that would come from the 3 utilities, water, sewer, and storm for the maintenance and operations at Public Works. And about $1.2 million would need to come from the general fund in some form. The costs for the utilities portion has been incorporated into our future rate studies for what our needs are for that debt service. So we've already incorporated that piece for each of 3 utilities. The next piece is determining how are we going to fund that $1.2 million debt service for the general fund. And then, so the plan also showed what that impact might look like over time. So keep in mind that as we hit 2025 in this graph, it's showing the expenditure for the actual improvements as well as the debt service starting to be paid for the issuance of the bonds. So it's not necessarily that the whole amount would be an impact at that time. We would issue bonds, in this scenario, issue bonds in 2025 with the intent of starting to pay back those bonds in 2025. So you're getting the funds to pay for all of the improvements, and we're starting to pay that back in 2025. And you can see the breakdown of how those might impact for the different areas, whether it's public works, parks, police, administration, or in this one, the general maintenance, again, for that deferred maintenance on all city facilities. So, summary, the intent of the plan was to find a cost-effective way to address the critical investments that we need for our facilities and meet some of our long-term needs for both the evidence needs for police as well as the physical training space that they need, finding facilities and positioning the facilities such that we can efficiently serve our community as we grow, and addressing those most critical needs that we have at our maintenance and operations facilities, while achieving this as a reasonable and straightforward funding strategy, so something that this city could actually accomplish, and lays the foundation for that future expansion for police headquarters, whatever that may look like in the future. And that's it. Questions?
All right, does anyone on the council have any questions? Yes, Yolanda, council member.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ingrid, the Game Farm Park area, who's using that right now?
The Parks and Maintenance and Operations, so they have a satellite facility there today. This would be expanding on that facility.
At one time, didn't we have the police department using
So
that?
that's a different location
Oh, I thought
at
it was
Game
there.
Farm.
Okay.
So the facilities that you're talking about there are located at the corner of R Street and 21st, or 29th.
Yeah.
This facility is located, I think, further to the back of the park.
There's still a stolen car task force and another tenant in the
In the
previous
front.
state parks property.
Okay.
We already have an existing building inside a Game Farm Park that like 6 of our employees are housed out of that needs to be improved.
Can I ask just one more
Yes.
question? And you mentioned about going and building on top of M&O.
Not planning on building on top of
No,
M&O.
okay.
We would be building an additional, I can back up to that
Yeah, could you
slide.
go back?
Sorry, give me just a second.
Is it page 12?
Yeah, so we wouldn't be building on top of any of this. We would be building a new crew space across from where the current building is, building some additional storage space next to that, and then modification within the existing crew building and shop space that we have for addressing the staff. There's a small mezzanine that we have in the existing building, and that may be modified as well in that, but we would look at that as we actually move forward with figuring out what we need to do in that building. That would be near the last step. The very last step for Public Works as M&O would be the covered fleet parking
Okay.
for our high-value fleet.
Yeah, I remember when we were talking all about this several years ago and stuff, so, and I remember getting the consultant, so it's nice to see what they came up with. Just one more, please. The bonds, are those gonna be, are they gonna go out to the people for a vote, or how are we doing those?
So, and that's part of a discussion that probably needs to happen in a budget process. For the amount of 38 to 40 million that we're talking about for the current improvements, that would be something that the city could do without going to a vote of the people if we can identify where we are funding that 1.2 million in the general fund out of existing revenues. So whether we decide we're gonna assign funds to that or other general fund revenues to that, you could do that. You just have to have that capacity. It doesn't necessarily require the vote of the people to issue those types of bonds.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yes, Councilmember Baldwin.
Yeah, so with this recap for us, I feel like I've seen a couple of the items that have come through in budget, at least in the time that I've been here. So like the Justice Center roof has already been done, correct? Okay. I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure we've, like,
Yeah, so some
like, I
of
think I've seen that in vouchers a couple of times.
Yeah, so the plan was developed in 2021. There were things that were already in the works or in the process. As we're with M&O, you also already have us working on the expansion of our fleet shop space. That was also something that came through the council as part of the last budget cycle with the police assigned vehicle program to expand that fleet space because we needed more space than what we had originally identified with a significant expansion of the fleet space.
Yeah, I was, because on like this slide, for example, and some of the others, it shows phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so I was trying to get a sense of maybe where we were in those color codings.
Yeah, I would say the stuff that's being done right now is really all phase 1.
Okay.
We really need to move into phase 2, and that phase 2 may change a little from what you see in this plan, simply because time has passed. You also brought in the assigned vehicle program with police that may change some of what we need for the police space. So there is part of that first phase, and that 2.3 million approved for this year is to do some master planning for the police facilities with the 12th Street property, so we can figure out exactly what we need to do and what should that first phase really be for the police improvements. So that is all work that's identified to start this year.
And then,
Yes, Councilmember Baldwin.
sorry, I want to make sure
Appreciate it, yep.
questions come up. The other area I wanted to ask about, I think maybe because this has got master facilities plan on it, its title as opposed to just like, hyper focus in these areas. Where are we sitting with all of our other, buildings and facilities within our portfolio? So we've got the rec center, we've got, obviously the postmark, which is going to have some additional work underway, I think in the lower level. All of those more peripheral buildings.
So, and this plan didn't necessarily look at every peripheral building that we had. It was very much focused on those 4 areas for the admin. So City Hall and Annex, did we have enough space for the staff that were housed in those facilities? And then our maintenance and operations shops, because we knew we were getting short on space there. And police, obviously, we knew we needed space for them. So it was very much focused on those 4 areas and was not necessarily evaluating all of the facilities that the city had other than when we look at the deferred maintenance piece for the facilities and how much is the city spending in general on its facilities, and that included looking at the full square footage of the properties that we had versus what are we spending and what should we be spending to really be in line with kind of what industry standards says we should be.
Okay. Is that going to be something that we would have another study in the future to cover all of those peripheral buildings?
And I don't know that I can answer that, because I don't manage the facilities for all of the cities, so I don't know that I can answer what a facility planning process may be. I do know that our facilities staff do look at each of the facilities and identify needs each budget cycle as to what they need to do. And I think that that's one of the issues that we have, is that we're not planning an amount to go towards all facilities. We're planning based upon what the current need is at a facility. And so we're kind of paying as we go.
I believe that. Bless you.
Do we have any other council members that have a question? Did you have a follow-up?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that ties back to the session we had for the special focus area for finance when we were covering facilities management. I think that's looking at what types of standardized approaches we could have so it's more fiscally sustainable in the long run and less fluctuation. So that lines right up with it. So no, thank you.
Thank you, council member. Any other questions before we bid Director Powell adieu for the night? All right, thank you,
Thank you.
Director. Appreciate it. Next up again is Acting Director Crum on an ordinance amending Title II of the Auburn City Code, formalizing the creation of the City of Auburn Department of Innovation and Technology. And magically, Director Tate is here.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, City Council, Mayor. There's three ordinances that are on tonight's agenda, each pertaining to a different department. So it's probably easiest just to describe a kind of a general overview of those three ordinances. Ordinance number 6933, 6934, and 6935 each add a new chapter of City Code to Title II. In Title II, if you were to some evening decide you want to peruse through Title II and see how it reads, each department in the city has a chapter of code dedicated to it that is really there to describe its purpose, its responsibilities, and its authority. While innovation and technology is listed as the first ordinance, it's probably easier to start with the other two, with Office of Equity and Department of Human Services, because those two departments are newer departments, and when looking through city code, we realized too that innovation and technology has never been codified either. So I prepared three different ordinances. I chose that approach rather than one ordinance because I think that the whereas recitals tell a story of why that department, a little bit more background of council's intention for placing a department in city code. So I thought that the whereas statements for the Office of Equity, the whereas statements for the Department of Human Services, and on the Human Services side, we're probably used to calling it the Department of Anti-Homelessness, but it kind of rounding out its role and its purpose, you'll see in their department name change. I probably don't need to spend 5 minutes on each ordinance to talk about each one specifically, but I think one that I'd like to spend a minute talking about is the Office of Equity. And the Office of Equity was a particularly important story to tell in those recitals. So there's the mechanics of describing the reason a department is there. There's the mechanics of describing its role and its authority. But in the case of the Office of Equity, it also ties to some additional work that we're doing in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Of course, Deputy Mayor Brown, Councilmember Baldwin, Mayor Backus, all participating in the work that we're doing as part of the Ready Coalition, and Deputy Mayor mentioned the Ready Coalition at the beginning of the meeting. So it's a conversation we've had at the Ready Coalition of the importance of formalizing the work of the Office of Equity. It's important in every area, all the departments, but particularly important in that area as it aligns with the work that we're doing at the Ready Coalition to make sure that we're emphasizing the importance of the work that comes out of that office. So I'm happy to answer any questions about what you read in there. I don't think a lot of presentation is particularly necessary on each of the codes, but you may have questions about a recital or some terminology that's been proposed. Recommendation this evening is to place this on the April 1st council agenda for consideration of council action. So with that, happy to entertain any questions.
Do we have any council members that have questions? Yes, Council Member Tracy Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Would the neighborhood program still fall underneath that department?
Under the Office of Equity?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
And same with Human Services, that group, those roles of managing the Human Services Committee and the Human Services staff that manage those contracts, all of that falls within that area too.
And Brenda oversees that whole umbrella.
Brenda oversees Office of Equity with neighborhood programs. Kent is overseeing the Human Services
Okay.
side.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Kate Baldwin.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. On this one, it's not so much a question, but more just comment, which is that I'm very excited to see these resolutions coming forward, particularly given the engagement that we've been able to have with staff throughout the past 6-9 months within the Ready Coalition about the importance of intent and the importance of being dedicated to something and, if you will, put it in writing. And so I think that's what we see these resolutions do, is really formalize that commitment by the city in these areas going forward. So I'm excited. It's great to have it come forward, and as the kids say, I'm here for it.
Sounds great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? I just appreciate your succinctness and the commonality of each of these, but that you wrapped it up very well. So thank you, and we appreciate our directors being able to take on slightly modified tasks and be flexible to get the work done for our city. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna stay here and be comfortable.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Next on our schedule here is ordinance number, the CDBG CAPER report.
Thank you. So this is an annual presentation that the department provides, and that is related to Community Development Block Grant. As the Deputy Mayor indicated, as the agenda bill indicates, as the presentation indicates, this is called a CAPER, the 2023 CAPER, which is a report that we're required to provide on an annual basis that talks about what we accomplished and what we did last year under CDBG funding. A couple of months ago, I was before City Council to talk about the annual action plan, which is a looking forward document. This is a looking backwards document. You're going to hear a few things in this presentation that were part of the presentation back in December for the 2024 annual action plan. We always like to start our human services kind of conversations and presentations to talk about which pot of money are we talking about, because it becomes very confusing when there's so much relationship between these funds and the world of human services. So we are talking about federal funds, federal community development block grant funds. So we are an entitlement program that is not unique, but most cities in King County are not entitlement programs. Their CDBG funds run through King County, And King County distributes funds and makes investments on behalf of those communities. In Auburn and a handful of other King County cities, we manage the program ourselves. So we have requirements. We have a lot of requirements to make sure that we're abiding by when it comes to being a CDBG entitlement program. We get an annual allocation from Congress, and it's called an entitlement because we don't have to apply for it. We are listed in the congressional allocation. The city of Auburn is listed, and the amount of money that we receive is listed through an act of Congress each year. It's not on the slides, but one thing that's always a little challenging with CDBG funding is we don't find out how much money we get until about midway through the year. So we operate off of assumptions, and we really use last year's number to help drive what we're doing this year. And sometimes we're happy, and sometimes we're a little panicked at what the number turns out to be, and we need to pivot. So here's a paragraph about what the CAPER is. I'm going to focus on the lower timeline because when I was here in December, I talked a little bit about the consolidated plan, and some questions came up by council, really I think probably about how to steer where things go, where investments are made, and where the prioritization is done for CDBG. Like, how do you spend this money? What can you spend it on? Well, we operate under a 5-year plan, and we're in the last year of our 5-year plan. So this year we will be rewriting and then presenting to council later in the year the 2025 to 2029 consolidated plan. But you'll see across the bottom there that we're really running on this annual cadence. We get a consolidated plan, it's 5 years. Each year we have to provide an annual plan that says a little bit more specificity about what we're going to do next year. And then every year we have to do a CAPER where we talked about what we did accomplish the prior year. Probably already spoke to some of this right now, but I think that that last bullet point is where a lot of the work is, a lot of the ongoing work with project management and the processes that we have to go through with environmental review and procurement. We partner with other agencies outside the city, and we partner with departments inside the city. Procurement is an important part. Contract management is important because there's a lot of federal requirements that are unique under CDBG program that don't apply in many other ways in which we manage or spend money. CDBG can be used for a lot of things. It's always important to share this, I think, for decision makers because you see that there's a broad spectrum of eligibility for CDBG. We don't spend money in all these areas. Our consolidated plan helps tell us which bullet points on here we're going to make our investments in. And the second bullet point, public facility ADA improvements, that's an annual thing that we work on. So Public Works helps identify a sidewalk repair project. CDBG can help fund it. They oversee it because that's what they're good at. And they help identify the location. It has to be in qualified census tracts where it's serving lower income communities. So there's a whole process for that. Public services, the easier term to say that is subcontracting. We find an agency and that's going to help us deliver some of the goals and objectives within the consolidated plan. And we partner up with them and we pay out up to 15% of our annual allocation. Can't exceed that. Home rehabilitation, we're going to talk about home repair in a few minutes. This is always something that everybody's really proud of that works on the program because it makes super impactful outcome in our community to help people stay in their home in a dignified fashion, and it serves folks who are below an income level that they have to qualify to apply for. And then we do cover that last bullet, program administrative costs. So we take 20% of that, the funding, the CDBG funding, and that helps pay for the work that we have to do. And then new this year is microenterprise assistance. So that is working with a nonprofit that's helping find and help fund some small businesses that would typically have a harder time breaking into the market due to language barriers, or they've recently immigrated here and don't know how to get started. So not a lot to report in that area yet, but looking forward to seeing what the outcomes of that program will be. So yeah, here's a few of the bullet points for where that money is going, that $560 or so thousand dollars in the city of Auburn. Some facts and figures. On the housing home repair side, we've had 96 residents or 62 households that have received support from that program. Last year we had a contract that helped deliver better fair housing outcomes, which is really like services to immigrants and refugees that are here and are in need of some help in finding a way to be housed. Rental assistance, the sidewalk repair programs, and then the 12 Auburn businesses receiving some microenterprise loan assistance. Income level graph, so it's all serving low income or extremely low income. This is what extremely low income and low income looks like under federal requirements. So the federal government establishes these numbers, which will be a little different than what the state or King County numbers look like, but that's what those are. And housing home repair. So a bunch of numbers here. I think you can see as you look at as you scan down the bullet points and you see that the households that are being served, I think those, age 60 plus households, that 51 of the 62 households with disabilities, female head of household, and average age of home. The common types of repairs that we do inside of a home, and I'll show some photos of before and after here in a second. We do lots of different things. I mean, some of it is, I said, keeping people in their home in more of like a dignified and safe manner, but a bunch of the work that we do also is to make the home more accessible as people age or if they have a disability. Here's some examples, before and after. We have lots of before and after photos. And you can just see like exposure. You want to keep people dry and warm, and you want to make sure that your homes are pest-free, things of that nature. This is kind of hard to make out, but right here there's a step. It was making it difficult for someone to be able to get in and out of their home, so poured a ramp. It kind of speaks for itself. A lot of mobile home work, a lot of mobile homes that the program helps improve. And I think this is the last slide. So here, we're in the middle of a public comment period right now. So this does get, the CAPER document does get put out in a draft format. It does go out for review, and then it goes through a process, for submittal, and then we move into like the next phase of action planning for next year. So, any questions?
Do we have any council members that have questions?
I just have a comment.
Okay.
I am always so proud to say that I'm part of this committee because I see where our dollars are being spent to help the elderlies or underprivileged people to get a water heater fix, or like their bathroom and their trailer, their awning. So I'm so proud that we're doing such a good job.
Well, I thank you for saying that, and I probably should start a presentation like this saying that the CDBG program and the work that comes out of the CDBG program and the consolidated plan directly ties back to the community wellness special focus area. It's not landing on your agenda this evening because there's a timeliness issue related to it, but yeah, it definitely ties to the work of the SFA, and appreciate the support.
Thank you. Councilmember Clinton Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Saw the quiz. So there's other municipalities that got the CDG, alphabets.
CDBG.
Yes. So is this in line, the HUD national objectives, is that for every municipality or just for Auburn? Because I know there's a few other cities that I know that got it.
Yeah, they're, really every city gets it. It's just a question of who manages it. So there are 5 or 6 other cities in King County that receive that allocation, and then they have to live within the program requirements of all those bullet points that were earlier in the presentation. And we choose, different cities choose different ways to spend their money.
Okay.
And then all the other cities, you know, the 35 other cities, King County gets it. And they manage it for them. They hold some of it back for the county, and they deliver some of it into the community. So we choose to hold it all and make sure that all of that money is directly impacting Auburn.
Okay.
Takes more administrative overhead to do that, more work, but worth it.
All right, thank you. Clinton, did you get your?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, sir.
Any other council members? I'll just, from my knothole, I just want to say, I'm with Councilmember Yolanda Trout Manuel on this. It warms my heart to see what our city can do and help our citizens that have the greatest need from falling into the lap of, you know, our previously titled homelessness director. And so thank you so much for the report out tonight. I know it's a team effort, so.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, now that Director Jeff is now done with his report, I'm going to turn the gavel over to our Public Works and Community Development Special Focus Area Chair, Tracy Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So first up on the agenda this evening is an ordinance for 6939. This is granting Ziply Fiber Pacific LLC for a wineline telecommunications. So with that, we don't have Ingrid here, so.
No, you've got Amber Old, who is our right-of-way specialist, who will go through a briefing with you for this one.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. As Ingrid said, I'm Amber Old, right-of-way specialist with Public Works Department. I will keep this very brief to round out your evening. Draft ordinance number 6939 is for franchise agreement number FRN 23-0003 for Ziply Fiber Pacific LLC for wireline telecommunications. Under Title 20 of the Auburn City Code and consistent with federal and state law, any company that wants to locate their communications or utility facilities in the city's public ways are required to obtain a franchise agreement with the city. Ziply's franchise application was reviewed and found to be complete per the city's code requirements. They're proposing to install fiber optic cable and electronic infrastructure in the public ways of the city to provide business and residential data and telecommunications services to customers located inside of the city limits. Ziply has requested a citywide franchise over all public ways of the city so that they can build and serve all areas of Auburn. And the agreement will cover future expansion of their facilities. Their proposed initial build-out area includes mainly the valley areas of Auburn, Central and South Auburn, and then they have areas slated for further evaluation for future build locations that include Leah Hill, the West Hill, North Auburn, Lakeland Hills, and further east out on Auburn Way South. Commercial areas will be marketed and built on a success-based approach according to requirements. Installation of fiber optic conduit will include underground directional boring and overhead attachment to existing utility poles, and the final location plans, engineering, and construction schedules, including restoration of the right-of-way, are all managed through the city's permitting processes, which are a requirement of the franchise agreement. The agreement would be for a term of 15 years, and in bringing this forward to City Council for review, city staff have verified that it meets the code requirements that council must base your determination on. Public hearing is currently scheduled for April 1st city council meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council members, any questions? I actually have a couple, thank you.
Sure.
First off, timeline, when are we looking at, I mean, obviously we have to approve this moving forward, are they going to get started right away?
I am aware that they've already applied for construction permits. Those construction permits are currently on hold pending outcome of their franchise agreement application.
And timeline for this project would be?
It's a they've proposed a full city, so they're planning on constructing right away, but as far as getting to all areas of the city, that kind of depends on their schedules, and I don't have that specific information.
I think this is a fantastic opportunity for the city. I mean, right now, having a faster way to connect, especially for our school districts and our homes and our residents, I think this is great. So, thank you. Appreciate it. I think that does it. That was one and done for our special focus group tonight. And with that, I'll hand it back to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for your efficient work here. So, having no other business before us,
Just one last item I was going to add, which is to wish any of our Hindu residents a very happy Holi, which is the festival of colors, love, and spring, which is a big celebration around the world. So,
thank you.
best wishes for Holi.
Did anyone else have anything else they needed to bring up? All right, then we'll conclude the meeting. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.